Hello and welcome to another episode of Catholic Messenger Conversations. I am your host, Dan Russo, editor of the Catholic Messenger. I'm here with my co-host, Lindsay Steele, diocesan reporter. We are going to try something a little bit different today. We're going to do a news roundup, and then we're going to discuss an upcoming event and some of the other current events surrounding the beatification of Archbishop Fulton Sheen. So, Lindsay, why don't you start us off? What are we covering lately?
Well, there's a lot happening right now, which is kind of surprising. Usually summer's a bit of a lull, but there's a lot going on right now. Bishop Dennis Walsh ordained Father Alfonso Pisano to the priesthood at Sacred Heart Cathedral earlier this month. The California native had a long journey to the priesthood. He felt a calling from a young age, but really took his time to figure out how and where to serve. And fortunately, he ended up here with us. He had some friends from California come up to celebrate his ordination, which is not exactly easy to get from here to there. There's no direct flights between here and the nearest airport, so it's nice that they could make it work. And Dan, you wrote about them too, right?
Yes, there was a couple, Kelly and her husband, who Kelly Rivas is the woman that I interviewed, and she basically met Father Alfonso when they were working at Disneyland in California. So he had when you say long journey, we're talking about like he went from the Magic Kingdom to teaching in high schools to all kinds of private sector jobs, and then he went in and out of different seminaries until finally he answered his call. And this woman knew even at Disneyland that Father Alfonso was ready or was eventually going to serve people as a priest. So it was really cool to meet them. And her husband actually met him through their wedding, and he said the prayers at their wedding. So they were both here in Iowa. They had come a long way. They now live in the Diocese of Orange out near Los Angeles.
And another cool thing that happened recently, there's a vocations monstrance that John Paul II, now a saint, blessed at the start of the year of the Eucharist in 2004, and that was just days before his death. I looked into this, and he blessed 6 of them, one for each of the major populated continents. The one for North America toured for about a year, and then due to its popularity became a traveling monstrance under the watchful eye of Sarah International's USA branch. Father Dominic Wynn, one of our younger priests, learned about it last year and called Sarah USA in Chicago and found out that it would be available on Corpus Christi this year and decided to reserve it. He invited Bishop Walsh to his parish in Grinnell to lead a Corpus Christi procession on June 7th, and they prayed for vocations as well. And originally I was just going to do a photo and a cut line, but the more I looked into it, the more interesting it got. I couldn't find any record of the monstrance being in our diocese before. And I talked to Bill McAfoose, who leads the St. Sarah Club here in Davenport, and he couldn't recall it being here either. And there's this whole process with the shipping to make sure it doesn't get damaged or lost, because obviously this is a pretty valuable item. It has a protective case, much like a musical instrument might, and it has to be heavily padded in a UPS or FedEx shipment. Now, Dan, you had asked, do they have to take it on a plane with them, reserve a seat for it? Not quite, but the Sarans are in charge of shipping and purchasing insurance for it in case it gets lost or damaged, and it hasn't yet. In this case, Saran shipped the monstrance to Bill, and then he handed it to Father Dominic when he was in town for Father Pisano's ordination. And then after the procession, Bill picked it up and shipped it overnight to Texas. It was a tight turnaround. Usually they can do it in 2 to 3 days shipping, but it did make it to its next destination in time. And speaking of traveling long distances, Bishop Tom Hennon, a beloved former priest of the Diocese of Davenport, who now serves as a bishop in Oregon, came back to Iowa for the Red Dinner at Sacred Heart Cathedral. That's a yearly fundraiser. They usually bring in some pretty good speakers for that. And our editor emeritus, Barb Arlen-Fye, was on hand and got some nice pictures and put together a great story about that event. It was a special homecoming. I wasn't available that night, but I did get to see Bishop Hennon in the halls of the Chancery briefly, and it's always nice to see him. And then one story, which isn't out yet, but should be next week, and I love this one. Marlene France, who's been working in the Regina Catholic Schools office in Iowa City for the past 57 and a half years, yes, you heard that right, is going to retire at the end of this month. I had a chance to talk to her and some of her colleagues and former students, and it's the kind of thing that really touches your heart, and I can't wait for our readers to learn more about her. And perhaps the most exciting news of the last week and the topic of this podcast is our Archbishop Sheen pilgrimage. This is something Dan planned to celebrate the Archbishop's upcoming beatification. And Bishop Walsh has come on board to serve as our chaplain. So that's very exciting. Dan, so what can you tell us about it and about the Archbishop himself?
Well, I think one of the things we want to do at this event is we want to spiritually enrich people by getting together and going to see the places where an actual or would-be saint grew up. And it's not often that you have American saints. I believe there's only 4 American-born saints in the history of the Catholic Church, and he would be the 4th. The other thing about him is he's a Midwesterner. He grew up on a farm in Illinois, right outside of the city of Peoria. He was an altar boy at the cathedral there. He rose to the heights of the church after studying theology at a university in Belgium, and he became one of the first televangelists in American history. We all know about the famous ones today, like Joel Osteen, or the people you see on Sunday mornings, or there's even whole networks now dedicated to evangelism. But if you can imagine a Catholic bishop in full garb on a network TV show during prime time, he used to compete against the comedian Milton Berle, who was pretty popular in the 1950s, and he would beat him in the ratings. So all he had was a chalkboard, his red sash, his bishop's garb, and he was able to just talk and bring people in. So I thought, since he is going to be beatified, which is the step right before sainthood, that we should bring people over there so that they can get some of a sense of the spiritual heritage of this area. But also, it helps bring people together, and it's a fundraiser for both the cathedral, the Sheen Museum, which has mementos from his life and all kinds of other history, and also it will be a way to help raise funds for the messenger. So we are accepting people on the pilgrimage, and what I've learned through this process is that one person's life can make a lot of difference. You might have heard Sheen in the headlines, but some way or another, you're probably connected to somebody who knew Sheen or who was influenced by his work. So I know, Lindsay, you told me that if you weren't working for the Catholic Message, you probably wouldn't have heard of him, right? I mean, honestly. A lot of people in the modern times.
And I should mention, I went to college in Peoria.
Yeah, she went to college in Peoria. So for the younger generations, people don't know Sheen as much as they used to. But for people of a certain generation, he was. That was when we had 3 TV networks, and he got an audience of 20 to 30 million people per week. It's hard for us to imagine that because we have a fragmented media now, and nobody really sees that. But the messages that he put out, the thing that I learned by doing a preview story for this event is that his messages are resurging now. They're becoming more popular because there's a certain timeless element to them. And I'm going to give you a couple examples of what I learned about Sheen through this process. And maybe if you can't come on the pilgrimage with us, at the very least, it'll help give you a little sustenance for your spiritual life. One of the people I talked to through planning this pilgrimage is a priest named Monsignor Jason Gray. He is a priest for the Diocese of Peoria, and he's the executive director of the Archbishop Fulton J. Sheen Foundation. And he actually worked on the sainthood cause for Fulton Sheen. So he's a canon lawyer as well as a priest. And in the Catholic Church, many people who are Christian but maybe not Catholic don't know this. There's a very detailed process in order to become a saint. It's not just a thing by popular vote. And I don't know, Lindsay, maybe you can enlighten me. I mean, before I started this research, I had no idea, or I had some idea, but not to this extent, about how people become saints. And I just want to poll you. Had you ever looked into why or how people become saints?
I probably learned just kind of on the periphery of it when I was in religious ed in high school or whatnot. I know you have to have 2 approved miracles, and that's something that might trip a lot of cases up because that's a pretty big deal. They're not just going to consider anything to be a miracle.
Yeah, that's you're right on point there, because I knew that you had to have at least 2 miracles, but I didn't know what the approval process was in detail. And Father Gray told me about this particular approval process and just in general what happens. And just to educate our audience, the first thing is that the church, in conjunction with people who are skeptical, you have to be objective and skeptical of a person's life. So they look through all the person's writings, all the things they've done, and they say, did this person live a life of heroic virtue? And if that is proven to be true, then the person gets the title of venerable. That's the first major step. After a person is declared venerable based on their actions and their thoughts and writings during life, then you get into the miracles stuff. And what Father Gray told me was that they have to investigate the miracles in conjunction with medical doctors. And these medical doctors have to find, usually it's a healing of some kind that has no, typical medical explanation. And in the case of Fulton Sheen, Monsignor Gray was involved in investigating it. And there was a young mother who was giving birth at home in rural Peoria and outside of Peoria. And, on the scans and everything before this, the baby looked completely healthy, but there was a problem with the umbilical cord during the birth. And so there were problems, and the baby came out and was not breathing, and there was no heartbeat. So this is a quote from the article, from the interview I did with Monsignor Gray that I'm going to read about the case of this baby. The father baptized him James Fulton in honor of Sheen, and before the birth, in utero, everything looked good, and a complication during the birthing process caused the lack of vital signs. So what happened was this family prayed to Fulton Sheen. It took the ambulance about 20 minutes to get there. Then they had to transport the baby to the hospital. He was finally given medical attention, and after about 1 hour, the baby was revived. And not only that, but the baby had no complications, no brain damage, nothing like that. And that was the first miracle that was attributed to Sheen. It had to be investigated by doctors as well as theologians and others to make sure that this was legitimate. So Monsignor Gray was among those that signed off on this. It was sent to Pope Francis. Pope Francis approved the miracle in 2019, but then there were some delays about Fulton Sheen's process. A lot of it had to do with where his body was going to be buried, and there were some legal fights. Long story short, the beatification was announced in the spring, and he's going to go through that process on September 24th. And then there's going to be one more miracle that has to be attributed, and that can take a long time. And like you said, some of these people, they get through the first miracle, they're beatified, but it could be decades or even generations, or maybe they never get to sainthood. But Monsignor Gray told me some breaking news, which is since it took so long from 2019 until now, he's already involved. He's part of the team that's investigating other claims of miracles. And he says there's a pretty good chance that within several years, like a year or two, maybe 3, that they will have that second miracle. And then Sheen will then become a canonized saint in the Catholic Church. So these are some of the background things. I don't know, you've been to Peoria. We're going to go there, and during this pilgrimage, we're going to see not only where Sheen served as an altar boy, the cathedral where he was ordained a priest, and also where his tomb is located. That's one of the stops we're going to make. We're also going to go to this museum, which has mementos from his life that people have sent in. He's a pretty beloved figure around the world, even in other countries, because he was part of the Pontifical Mission Society. During his time as a bishop, he raised money for the Catholic missions abroad, and he was very successful at it, raising in the tens of millions of dollars. In fact, he even donated his entire salary from his TV show, Life is Worth Living, to charity, including the missions. So these are some of the things that I learned in researching this story, which made it a very, topical thing and a personal thing, because you get to talk to somebody who is directly involved in this unusual process for sainthood. So, Lindsay, I just want to ask you, you've been to Peoria. Mm-hmm. What can you tell me about the town? I've never been there. What do you remember?
I don't know if anybody's ever asked me that. I would say that it's somewhat similar to Davenport, where I lived, Butte, where you live, any of these river towns in kind of the setup. Where, the older sections near the river, out farther is where you got the shopping malls. You got Bradley University, which is where I went. I've been to a couple of the churches there. One was right next to college, and then another one near the river is where my sister got married. I can tell you where some of the good restaurants are. Some of them are still there. Some of them, like Avanti's, which was very much beloved by college students, is no longer there. But you guys are going to have some nice sandwiches on the trip, and there's lots of options. So if you need gluten-free, you need vegetarian. There's going to be some options for you, and that's all in the fee. But if you ever get a chance to go to Peoria, One World is my favorite place.
Awesome. Well, the thing I thought was cool is that we're a religious or a Catholic newspaper, and we try to bring the faith to the real world and things that are going on actually in the world and things that people are doing. The thing I like about this is this Sheen, who has this great reputation at this point, started small. He started in a regular town, just like the towns that we live in. Mm-hmm. And, you might think of also the Pope over there in Rome, or people like far away, in France or Africa, where they've had a lot of apparitions and things like that. But this brings it home. So I hope that people, so far we've got about half the bus full, and we're looking for more people to come. As part of the day, we're going to say Mass, but we're also going to have a little bit of fun. I mean, there'll be a lunch. We're going to go on a scenic drive there in Peoria. There's a place there that I guess Teddy Roosevelt called one of the greatest, natural wonders of our country. It's called Grandview Drive. And again, I think that this is something where you want to bring the faith alive in your heart so that you can bring it to others, and it's a good opportunity. And I know.
Remind our readers, what's the date and the times for that one?
Well, it's going to happen on July 24th. We're leaving at 8 a.m. from the St. Vincent Center here in Davenport, which is right near St. Ambrose. And then we're going to get there around 10 a.m. We're going to do a tour of the museum. We're going to have lunch and see a documentary film. Then we're going to tour the cathedral, and we're going to have Mass near the tomb of Archbishop Sheen. We're going to do the drive I talked about, and then we'll be home the same day. So the cost is $100, and you can sign up on our website, catholicmessenger.net, or you could just call us. We are also, we're not only are we hoping that you'll come on the pilgrimage, but if you can't, we're hoping that you'll pray for us and just pray for our country in general as we come towards the 250th anniversary of the country. This is one of the big things going on. I know that there's a lot of, uncertainty or division in the country, but also this is one of the things where, our faith can bring us together, regardless of what faith you are. Maybe you're Catholic, maybe you're a different branch of Christianity. When we pray together, I think it makes things better, and it transforms the world, which is what we're trying to do with this pilgrimage and what we hope in general could happen. The other thing I'd like to say, and Lindsay, I don't know if you, in covering these stories, you get to meet a lot of great people who live out their faith. You talked about that secretary. Mm-hmm. Sheen might be a famous example of somebody who puts his faith into practice every day, but I think you can attest that we get to meet people that, like that person you just mm-hmm. interviewed, that lives it out. Now, you mm-hmm. said she was a really great lady when I talked to you, and we're going to have that story. And was there anything in particular about her that you thought, hey, this is somebody that I can look up to, or that, is a role model for these kids that she deals with every day?
Well, I had asked her at the end of the interview, and it's not in my final version of the story because it just kind of didn't fit, but I had asked her if she had any advice for people that are there now, students and staff that will be there in the future. And she says, be kind. Remember to always be kind. Mm-hmm. But I would say, as far as, this trip is concerned, and pilgrimages, anytime you're around other people, for the same cause and experiencing the same things, it really is a great chance to meet friends and meet people. You never know who has a story. I've been to Regina lots of times. I have never met Marlene. You never know who you're going to run into, and a lot of times it's the people you wouldn't expect that have the greatest stories. So if you go on something like this pilgrimage, you're not just going to learn about the Archbishop Sheen or, see Grandview Drive, which I have been on before. I was on it once on a date. It was probably the only good thing about the date was that drive. But just great opportunities to get to know people, and who doesn't need connection right now with how divided the world is.
Sure. And I think that's the thing. Sheen is a famous example, but we can all be like that. We can all be lights to people in our lives. And I think people like him are just a sort of a beacon pointing us to that greater light that we can also, try to emulate. So
And help us to see why life is worth living.
yeah, well, there you go. I like how you tied that in. So, yeah, and I mean, I think one of the things, and I guess I'll close with this because we did pull a clip from Archbishop Fulton Sheen where he talks about prayer. It's just a short clip from one of his longer TV shows that were on for several years. The height of his fame was in the 1950s when he was on that TV show, and he won an Emmy for it, which is pretty remarkable if you can imagine a Catholic bishop winning an Emmy, which is a secular award for broadcasting. But he talks about prayer as being a dialogue between yourself and God. So you don't just talk, but you also have to listen. And I think that's an opportunity that a pilgrimage gives anyone, whether it's this Sheen pilgrimage or any time you take time apart from your busy life to quiet things, be in nature, or be in a place where you're heading towards God's grace. So he talks about that. So I wanted to close with that clip. It's about 2 minutes long. So we'll just let Bishop Sheen take us out. And we want to thank you all for listening to this podcast. If you're interested in our work, go to thecatholicmessenger.net. You can subscribe there. You can also see some of our stories, including the article I referenced, my interview with Monsignor Jason Gray, or Lindsay's interview with Regina. What was her name again, Lindsay?
Marlene Frantz, and it should be out in next week's paper, which would be the 25th of June.
So Sheen is your famous saint, and she's your everyday future saint, I guess you could say. So yeah, we'll leave you with a little clip from Fulton Sheen, and thank you to KALA and Dave Baker for helping us make this podcast possible. We'll see you next time. Thank you.
For now.
Peace be to you. Many look on prayer in somewhat the same fashion as an aviator may look on a parachute. He hopes that he will never have to use it, but it may come in handy in case he has to bail out. Prayer, as our blessed Lord talked about it and taught it, was something quite different. Let us first of all see how prayer was used in his own life. There are 4 great heads under which our blessed Lord spoke of prayer. First of all, his prayers were at the great events of his life. He prayed at his baptism. He prayed before he chose the 12 apostles. He prayed also before Peter made the confession of his divinity. He prayed at the Transfiguration. He prayed in Gethsemane. He prayed on the cross. And in addition to these great events of his life, he prayed also in the course of his ministry. He prayed, for example, before the great conflict with the temple authorities. He prayed before giving the apostles the Lord's Prayer. He prayed when the Greeks came to him. And he prayed after feeding the 5,000. In addition to these 2 special headings of prayer, he also prayed at his miracles. He prayed, for example, when he healed the multitudes, when he fed the 5,000, when he healed the deaf-mute, and when he raised Lazarus from the dead. And then in a 4th category, there were prayers that he said for others. He prayed for the 11. He prayed for the whole church. He prayed for those who nailed him to the cross. And in a very special way, he prayed for Peter.